All right, guys, what is up? Welcome in GC Live, Monday episode of the show. As always, presented by our guy, Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans, ClintHammond.com, 803-422-6797, NMLS number 71597. I do not know why NMLS are the four hardest letters to say in a row, but they absolutely are. But what is not hard to do with Clint is to call him up and talk about what your options are to buy a home. The beauty of it is you may think you know, if you've never bought a home, you may think you know everything that goes into it. There are probably aspects to it, Chris, that make home ownership maybe way more attainable than you think. And then there are probably some little hidden things, some hidden costs, some things that you're going to want somebody who has been in this game for a very, very long time to help walk you through. That is why you're going to hit up Clint, 803-422-6797. You can call that number. You can text that number. That's his cell phone. You can talk Gamecock football with him. You can talk about what you think Sellers is going to do this season. I'm sure he'd love to hear your opinion on that, while also telling you about the markets and what the interest rates are doing right now too. So we've been telling you about Clint for years now. Cannot recommend him enough. If you're in the market for a home or future home ownership is something you're looking towards, hit up our guy, Clint Hammond, CMG Home Loans.
I bet Clint might have some opinions about Josh Dobson, Wes. You think so? I think he probably would.
Indeed.
Same got the deal. Look, mortgage, if you need one, if you're thinking about one, definitely hit up Clint. If you're thinking about a new or used vehicle, check out our friends over at Ferry Chevrolet. I can't spit that one out either, Wes. FAIREY. FerryChevrolet.com. 803-937-4531. Joseph Ferry, fourth generation dealer. They've been around since 1926. Conveniently located in Orangeburg. So if you're in Columbia, if you're in Charleston, if you're in Orangeburg, pretty easy drive to get there and well worth it. But the cool thing is you can go to their website, FerryChevrolet.com. Check out their financing options, their new and used inventory. See if you see something that you like, and their team can help you from online, or you can give them a call, 803-937-4531.
Big shout out to both of those awesome sponsors, and shout out to everybody that's already here in the chat. Keith and Fred, what's up? Hope we got some other folks out there too. Y'all check in with us. Hope you're doing well. And man, Chris, the countdown is on. We will be talking about preseason football camp before we know it, but let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. The month of June for our purposes for football recruiting on campus essentially over. And now let's wait and see what the returns are going to be on several of these guys. And South Carolina hosted their final major official visit recruiting weekend of the summer of June this past weekend. 5 OBs, 5 guys that South Carolina really wants, 5 just high quality targets, man. And let's start much like we did on the radio today with Josh Dobson. And I said it then, I said it leading into the weekend, man. I think just getting to today, knowing kind of the way the winds are blowing in college football, high school recruiting right now, it feels like there are certain schools, and just generally speaking too, when these guys take official visits, especially the earlier visits, there is some pressure to shut things down. There's some pressure to, hey, we're going to offer you X, Y, and Z, but it may not be there tomorrow. You need to go ahead and lock this in. So I thought a little bit of a win, man, for Carolina to get to this weekend, knowing, early on there was all that LSU buzz coming out of one of the spring visits there. There was a ton of A&M buzz going into the visit to College Station. I've told people, and I know you've kind of heard some things here too, Chris, I'm not counting out Michigan. Like, I think they've been a dark horse in this thing. I think there's some things about Michigan that would be very just intriguing to Josh Dobson and his family. So not counting those guys out. But South Carolina got it to the weekend. They got him on campus. Mom and dad were on campus. Just a big, important weekend for South Carolina as Dobson closes out his recruitment and is set to make his announcement on July 1st.
Yeah, and 4 hats will be on the table, maybe literally, Wes. I think that was his exact quote, that he'll have 4 hats on the table. Those 3 you mentioned plus Auburn. And I think the schools that we're mainly tracking with Dobson are the ones that you mentioned, right? Auburn may have a hat on the table, but A&M, Michigan, South Carolina, those are the ones that over the last several weeks we've been tracking the most when it comes to Josh Dobson. And look, you make a good point, man. I'm kind of surprised that, you know how these new phrases are getting thrown into the recruiting and NIL and transfer portal lexicon, the shutdown number. I feel like that's going to become a thing at some point because it's been a strategy for different programs of basically trying to get guys in, and shutdown number being what's it going to take from an NIL standpoint to get you to not take any other visits, shut this thing down right now. And that's just one part of the equation. The other part may be, look, we're taking one guy at your position or one more guy at your position. We need to know now, right? And we're seeing like putting the pressure on, trying to squeeze guys, like that's been a part of recruiting for as long as recruiting's existed. But in this new era of roster management, I think it's become amplified, right? For Josh Dobson, to be clear, NIL is certainly not the only component of this recruitment. Like you've alluded to, he's big on academics. He's big on development. He wants the family sign off from everything we've seen. He's close with the family. They've been on the visits, right? So there's a lot that's going into this decision. But for South Carolina, the key was getting it to that last visit. We've said this so many times, but Josh Dobson said earlier this year, hey, I gave South Carolina the last visit for a reason. They're the in-states, even though he's playing over the border for his senior year, for all intents and purposes, this is an in-state prospect. He's got a long-time relationship with Torian Gray, with Darren Usher, with Shane Beamer, with all the rest of the staff. But none of that means anything if you don't actually get that last visit, right? So South Carolina needed to get to this point. They got to that point. And now you have basically, 9 days to try to close this thing out and land a commitment. I think this was an important visit, Wes, not from the standpoint of Josh Dobson and his parents are seeing something new. Oh, I didn't know that existed at South Carolina. Didn't see that. But reinforcing why he liked South Carolina, why it could be a good fit for him. Everything we've heard from a feedback standpoint, not only from Josh, but just talking to others familiar with the visit and the recruitment, is South Carolina put forth a really good presentation for him. Wes, also notable, two more notable things. Jeremiah Donati involved once again, South Carolina's athletics director. That clearly made a big impression on Dobson when Donati sat down with him this spring on an unofficial visit that was really more in-depth than a lot of unofficial visits that you see. He was back in play again this weekend, talking to Dobson and the family. I think that was big and resonated. But the other thing was the thing that South Carolina's been dealing with a lot in this recruiting cycle, and that is, what is Shane Beamer's long-term status in Columbia, right? We have seen, even after some years that weren't so great, we have seen guys sign up to play for Shane Beamer and his coaching staff here in Columbia. Dylan Stewart, Nick Carver, Lenora Sellers. And those guys have signed up more than once because really every year you're signing up anew, Lots of people thought, South Carolina went 4-8. They're going to lose the whole roster. People were trying to portal out Sellers and Stewart and J.R. Johnson and Swain, and they kept all those guys. Here's one important distinction that somebody made to me the other day I thought was a great point. South Carolina still signed a really good recruiting class after last year, and they signed a good portal class. For portal guys specifically, a lot of those guys have a shorter timeline. Some of them just have 1 year to play. Right? For a guy like Josh Dobson, who's a 3-year player, a 4-year player, at this point in the 2027 cycle, there becomes a little bit more of a, that guy be here in 2 years or in 3 years, And so I think he needed some clarity about that. That clarity, quite frankly, is not going to come fully until South Carolina hits the field this year. And we all know needs to win some games. But it seems like his conversations with Beamer, his conversations with Donati gave him some clarity on that stability. And I think it was helpful from that standpoint to be able to have those very frank conversations about that.
Yeah, and Chris, I mean, it sounds like, I mean, you can take multiple approaches to this, right? You can just kind of head in the sand. Hey, we're just not even going to talk about that. We're not going to bring that up. Not even worth talking about. Or you can be very head on with it and just say, hey, we see what's out there. We're on social media too. We know what people are saying. Let's address this directly. And by all indications, South Carolina addressed it directly this weekend with Dobson, which appeared to resonate, with him and with his family. And yeah, here's the thing, man. You can't really know until the season hits here, and you see what actually is happening. But I'll say this, man. We've been around the program a lot this month in different avenues, and there really is a quiet confidence, I feel like, about what this season may be for South Carolina. And, you hope you can go add a guy like Josh Dobson who's going to commit before the season. And then South Carolina obviously is going to be in a position to flip a lot of guys, I think, if they are able to follow through with what they were able to, or follow through by doing what they think they can do, what they hope they can do on the football field this fall. All right, so you mentioned the Final Four. We mentioned the date is July 1. We did a little bit of this on the radio, man. Let's try to chop the list down for people. The four are South Carolina, A&M, Michigan, Auburn. And Auburn is kind of stuck in there as a little bit of a dark horse. He took a visit there that appeared to go well. It feels to me like they came a little bit out of nowhere, like they weren't mentioned as much as some of the other schools. So whenever we do this, in no way are we ever saying like, hey, there's a 0% chance a guy's going to pick a school. I'm not saying that. But if we're going to kind of, I guess, play out how this thing may go, I think Auburn is the one you feel most comfortable chopping off of this four in terms of the most likely pick. Now, the interesting thing about Josh's recruitment right now, man, and I would say we'll get into Nate Carson here in a second. There's a little bit of this with him, too. The interesting thing with Josh, I don't know if South Carolina's biggest competition is A&M or the school we deemed the dark horse, or I did, in Michigan, who has kind of come charging on fast, I would say, late in the race. So you would say for sure maybe a month ago there was a ton of talk about A&M. But as of right now, I could make a strong argument based on what we've heard about either one of those being the biggest competition.
Yeah, and I think, so I don't bury the lead. I'm not sure either. The Michigan and A&M buzz at different points, it has been very legitimate. I also think there's been a little bit of an underselling of South Carolina's chances, whether that was current as of a couple weeks ago, or even if you're kind of counting on, hey, when South Carolina gets that last visit, if they've lost some ground or they need to make up some ground, they'll probably be able to make it up and may be able to make it up enough to actually land him on July 1st. I think it's a little interesting that there was a ton of A&M buzz going into his official visit to College Station, which was the one right before South Carolina. Yet, is that right? Right before South Carolina, or was it Michigan?
Michigan was right before. It was
right
A&M
before.
a week before.
So 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, there was a lot of buzz for A&M. And since then, not that A&M's like, nobody said, oh, A&M's out. But has it died down a little bit? I think that's fair. Like, it's died down a little bit after the visit, which is, if nothing else, is interesting. Michigan's maybe picked up a little bit more. They got a more recent visit. On some level, that makes sense. But yeah, I think the two things can be true. Like, I think South Carolina's been undersold a little bit on the national media stage for Dobson. And we see this, man. We've seen it with, like, Dylan Stewart's a great example. South Carolina was constantly undersold there because he had, Ohio State, he'll probably go there. He'll probably go there. Nick Harbor, sometimes South Carolina undersold with him. it's just kind of the nature of the beast when you're talking about a prospect of Josh Dobson's caliber, where naturally they're going to get undersold a little bit. It just is what it is. I think that's true, but I also think the buzz about those other two programs has been, very legitimate. So, if you're South Carolina, Josh Dobson is deciding not this season, not in December. He's going to commit July 1st. Can you get this thing to the finish line where he's not literally signing, but basically signing up for, this is where I want to go, And so a lot of the conversations with South Carolina have been, again, related to that stability and him being able to feel comfortable of go where you want to go. We're going to be here. It's going to take care of itself. We're going to be here. Go where you want to go, and trying to make that the most comfortable option for him, which I do think they've done a really good job of making him and his family comfortable when they've been on campus.
And as they've done with all the DB recruits, Chris, just really honing in on what Torian Gray has done in terms of development, not just at South Carolina, certainly including South Carolina, but beyond that during his time, at other schools where he, probably has a top 5 track record in the sport in terms of number of guys he's put into the league from that position, combined with a school, frankly, that has traditionally put a lot of guys in the league from the defensive back spot. So we will see, and we will keep you updated on GamecockCentral.com with the very latest for the next, 8-9 days until Josh Dobson makes his announcement on July 1 via Rivals live stream. Let's keep it moving here, Chris. One of the more, I would say, noteworthy visitors this weekend because of the fact that he's committed to Kentucky is 4-star wide receiver Iveon Lewis, who, is someone that South Carolina, not really a new name for the Gamecocks. We noted a couple weeks ago, hey, he's on campus for 7-on-7 with his team, which isn't really ever necessarily a huge, telling sign or anything like that because it's a team camp. But what it does do is it puts a guy back in front of the staff. Mike Furry was watching both Lewis and several of his teammates compete, made sure to speak to those guys, check in with all the guys at Huguenot, and boom, all of a sudden we catch wind that Lewis is coming in this weekend for an OV. South Carolina, it appears, has really just caught his attention here down the stretch, and they've wanted a third high school receiver in this class. It's maybe tracked in different directions, I would say, in terms of who would actually take up that third spot. At one point, it looked like it might be Amari Patterson. He might be the third receiver. And Carolina sort of decided not to take a commitment there. As of right now, I think you can say it's kind of trending towards Lewis being the most likely candidate for that spot.
Yeah, and this one, to back up a little bit, when he committed in May, Lewis, to Kentucky, we told our subscribers on Gamecock Central, keep this guy, if you got kind of a personal hot board, keep him on there, because this is a guy that South Carolina may ultimately decide to bring him in for an official visit. At one point, Wes, he was booked for one, and those kind of got changed around because of that May commitment. But the staff decided to pretty quickly pivot here. He's someone that they're very familiar with, that they had built a relationship with. Like I said, at one point he was booked for an official. So this was an easy pivot. And then I think also, Wes, one thing to keep in mind is that 7-on-7 you referenced. It was kind of another sign-off, if you will, for South Carolina staff, being able to watch him compete in that team passing camp setting. Mike Furry, the rest of the staff could put eyes on him once again. And it kind of drove home of this is a guy that we would like to take. And so, you bring him in for the visit with the idea in mind of this is a guy that we would like to flip if you're South Carolina. So he's been quiet, I think, by design, Wes, leading up to and right after the visit. We weren't able to talk with him yesterday on Sunday after he wrapped up his visit, or even here on Monday just yet. But I think there have been, even leading up to the visit, some pretty positive indications for South Carolina here. Kentucky is obviously concerned, as they should be. They're doing everything that they can. but this is one that we're closely tracking. And if South Carolina can pull off the flip, that would be that third receiver take that they've been pretty picky about, pretty choosy about in this class.
Yeah, a little bit of an outlier here, too, in terms of the different rankings. Rivals has him as a 4-star, 24/7, a high 3. So we'll see kind of how that evens out as the process goes. Austin here with a comment, Chris, says, replied to Wes on TIF under the film, but can y'all see some Jaheim Bell here as a bigger athlete? Seems to have longer speed compared to quickness and track steep ball as well. Yeah, I've seen him in person. I don't know what the listing is. Jaheim was what, Chris? What was he listed at? 6'3", 6'2"?
I want to say it was 6'3". Let's see.
6'3",
230.
Yeah, and I mean, Lewis is a big kid. I think Lewis probably still a little bit faster than Jaheim. Jaheim still built. Jaheim was kind of a running back and an H-back tight end body, I feel like. But yeah, there are some similarities there. Both really good athletes, both guys who have some run after the catch. I really like, and this is just very brief film, but how Lewis catches the football while still moving his body, like catches the ball out front with his hands, continues his forward motion, doesn't have to slow up, adjusts well to the ball. And Chris, to be honest with everybody, I'm kicking myself for not watching him a little bit more than we did at that 7-on-7. I did watch him some. The first thing you think when you look at this kid is, okay, like that guy looks the part, like very physically developed, very physically impressive, and quite obviously impressed the staff as well. The thing about these 7-on-7s, man, sometimes you will hear like if he had not been impressive, he hadn't played well, maybe Carolina we'll let him go to Kentucky. But then if you go out there and you impress and you keep coming on and you play well in front of the staff, there's maybe a little bit of, well, maybe we should go take this guy,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it was kind of in motion in some ways. Again, go back to May. Carolina had always kept in mind, like, this may be a guy that we circle back to. It looked like it may not happen when South Carolina was a little bit more engaged and down the road with Amari Patterson. But again, once that decision was made, very easy pivot here because it's a guy you're familiar with. And then you see him in camp and go, okay, he checks the boxes from an eval standpoint of what you wanted to see. You'd seen him before, seen his film, talked to his coach, you talked to everybody around him. The kid. This isn't someone who came to camp once in a 7-on-7 and you go, okay, like you've done some background legwork here. It was just kind of I think maybe a final sign off, to be able to look at him one more time, again, leading very closely into the visit, weekend. So Carolina had been working on that behind the scenes, obviously kept it pretty quiet for a good bit up until I think we reported it on the day of the visit, right? And then he shows up for the visit and things have been quiet, again, by design. I think just to kind of keep some of the pressure off of him a little bit. But all indications are South Carolina's got a pretty good shot. That's not a projection that it's definitely happening, but it certainly seems like it could happen and would be, I think, a nice get for them.
Yeah, feels like something to keep a very close eye on here in the coming days. Man, let's shift forward to a local guy, 4-star blue chip offensive lineman, Nate Carson, another just long time target for South Carolina. I'll tell you what caught my attention a little bit. Oh, wow. We got did you just see that on the film, Chris?
No, I totally missed that.
For those who are on the audio version of the show, I apologize, but
oh yeah,
Julian Walker. A Julian Walker marker on Nate Carson's film, as in like, hey, here's me blocking this guy who at the time was going to Michigan. So that could be a sign, Chris, of future battles maybe at South Carolina's practices. We shall see where this thing goes. And so Nate has his Final Four in play too. He's going to announce on July 3rd. You have South Carolina, Georgia, Colorado, and Clemson all involved in this thing. And so there's your 4 There's your date. And I'll tell you, you mentioned what stood out to you about Josh's. What stood out to me about our interview with Nate Carson was what he said about Jay Smooth, who's Jason Smith, the assistant O-line coach, and Randy Clement, South Carolina's new offensive line coach, is just how much love he has for those guys. Man, I love those guys. As we know, Lonnie Teasley, the former O-line coach at South Carolina, probably one of the best O-line recruiters in the country. Like, this guy absolutely connected with kids. And that was something I've always had in the back of my mind with Nate. How much will it matter? Because we've seen the relationships that Lonnie had with guys long term. New staff comes in. We saw some of those early O-line targets, frankly, look elsewhere that I think South Carolina had a pretty good shot with at one time. Well, Nate, being a local guy, being highly interested in South Carolina, he has kind of stayed the course here, given the Gamecocks every shot to earn his commitment. They get the last visit here too, which I think is important, and just seems to have hit it off really well with those two guys to where that doesn't appear to be any type of hindrance that they are new at South Carolina, and it's not quite as long of a relationship as maybe he's had with some previous coaches.
Well, it doesn't hurt that he's local. He's 25 minutes down the road at Irmo High. And, I mean, Wes, we couldn't even begin to count how many times Nate Carson's been on campus since he's been recruited by South Carolina, which was very early, freshman year, sophomore year, I think. And, heck, the 2 days, I think 2 of the 3 days leading into his official visit, he was on campus, hanging out at camp, with teammates. He's been there a million times. There's a very high, very, very high comfort level. And so, look, I think Nate's recruitment, there's been a lot of ebbs and flows, ups and downs, however you want to categorize it. A lot of times, just to be frank, the school that got the last visit is the one that's had the most buzz, At one point, Tennessee had a ton of buzz. They're not even in the group of finalists now. Every school, I think, in that top 4 has probably taken a turn either at the top or maybe tied at the top, for him. And so if you're kind of trying to do what we did for Josh Dobson, out of that 4, who can you kind of trim off? I think the first one's probably, again, not a guarantee, but probably Clemson is not as high up there. Georgia's certainly in the mix. Georgia has seemed to want Nate Carson. Colorado is a geographic outlier, but Colorado, I like how you put it on the radio earlier. They've been aggressive on the NIL front. That's a way for them to try to attract talent, specifically talent that are in geographic regions. It's not very close to Colorado, right? And so with Nate, it kind of comes down to what is he going to prioritize? What is his family going to prioritize going forward? And I do think, one of the things he talked about a lot yesterday was that comfort level, staying at home. Shane Beamer's message to him was, you have everything you need in Columbia, South Carolina. Why leave? Why go elsewhere? So, I when Nate says that he's not sure what he's going to do yet, leading up to that decision on July 3rd, Wes, I believe that. I don't think that he's situated it yet. It's also somebody who's gone back and forth at different times. But South Carolina did get the last OV. How much does that help the Gamecocks going forward? I do think they help their cause this weekend.
Yeah, I agree. And this one's hard to predict, man. It really is. And again, I don't know if Georgia or Colorado, frankly, is the biggest competition in South Carolina. How much stock are we putting in the fact that, as you mentioned, like if you add it up, Nate, I think I got this right, man. Nate was on campus Monday last week. He popped up on Thursday. And then the OV started on Friday. So he made the short trip over to South Carolina Monday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So my man was at South Carolina more than he was not this past
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so
And of course, and again, it's easier than that dude's from Atlanta or Charlotte and he's on campus 3 or 4 days out of the week. Yes, we recognize it's easier, but still it does take some effort to do that. And, how much does that play into the whole local factor, the comfort factor with Nate and his family too going forward?
yeah, I'm just saying, man, this is a teenager. Like the fact you made the decision to just go hang out at South Carolina and be around your teammates and be around some current players, like and don't get me wrong, guys, recruiting is very different. If this was old school recruiting 20 years ago, I'd be like, that's a pretty good sign that this guy's going to end up at South Carolina. Now there's that whole other layer that plays into all this that makes it you can get yourself in trouble. You start making predictions based on visits, but one of the big just things you used to say in recruiting was follow the visits, and if you followed the visits on Nate, then that would have him wearing garnet and black. So I'm with you though, man. Get the sense that one is just not quite over. Hopefully we have a better idea of where he is headed once we get a little bit closer to July 3rd. But a fascinating recruitment, man. There are some parallels there to Josh's recruitment in that Carolina has been one of the schools that has stayed the course despite the other favorites kind of shifting and changing and moving around, throughout his recruitment. So, all right, let's see, man, we're at the midway point. So let's take a quick moment to tell everybody about a couple of our great sponsors, starting with ATSCO.
ATSCO, ATSKO.com. You hear about them every time Wes and I do GC Live program. ATSKO, ATSCO.com. They've been around for a really long time. Theme with a lot of our sponsors, I think. Great products for the outdoorsman. Whether you're an outdoorsman, you have the outdoorsman in your life and you're looking for a birthday gift, Christmas gift. I guess not too early to start shopping for Christmas ever, Wes. They got the Zero brand products, UV control, odor control, specialized laundry care, and detergents for hunters, as well as a variety of outdoor gear. Also have footwear, clothing, outdoor gear, waterproof solutions, even products for the pets in your life, pet care, the CareTex line. Go check them out. Got all sorts of products, wide variety of things that you may need, especially if you're an outdoorsman or if you have pets. That's atsco.com. You can order directly from the website, atsko.com.
All right, man, let's tell everybody about our new sponsor here, dude. It's our friends at Zen AI. You see it right there, hopefully on your screen. Let's see, Zen AI or Zen.ai. Make sure you get that right. Zen.ai is how you can pull this up, Chris. And Zen AI is pioneering vibe casting. It is the home of vibe casting, a new way to capture and share your conversations in the same way that vibe coding apps like Lovable and Claude Cowork make it possible for just about anyone, regardless of coding skills, to build their big ideas. Zen AI is going to help you turn a conversation into something worth sharing, a podcast, a reel, TikTok, no production skills required. And right now, Chris, Zen AI is actually paying new vibecasters to create their first vibecast. So if you create a sportscast about your favorite team with vibecasting, you're going to get paid to do it. You can vibecast live as the game happens, or you can record your analysis after. So bring your own co-host, invite me and Chris on, whatever it may be. What you're able to do with this, man, is just take a regular, good, high quality conversation, and then they're going to produce it for you. At the heart of Zen AI, it is an AI producer. So the producer will handle the edit, the audio cleanup, make it share ready, and all those different things. Humans are the talent. AI is infrastructure. Vibes required, production optional. Shout out to our friends at Zen AI. Head on over to zen.ai to sign up, or head to our show notes for a direct link. It is currently invite-only beta. So if you go to those links, you can join the waitlist today for a shot at early access. Again, welcome to our newest sponsor, Zen AI. Did I do okay on that, Chris? I got through it. It was
Man,
the first time.
platform. It looks really cool. So hopefully some folks will take advantage of that. Link in the description and the show notes there. Yes, great job, Wes. A plus.
Maybe we'll be doing GC Live on ZenAI. Who knows?
Vibecast to GC Live?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm down.
Maybe.
Maybe. Who knows?
Who knows? All right. Davion Jones, 4-star DB. Chris, another kind of, frankly, long-time target by Torian Gray and those guys. He is at Huff now alongside Josh Dobson. So you had, a couple of teammates there together. Not really, in my opinion, from everything we've heard, not some type of package deal. Like these guys are going to make their own decisions, and there's a little bit of overlap, but for the most part, their recruitments have kind of taken their own paths, right? And, LSU got Davion on campus like last weekend. That apparently went really, really well. LSU has felt good there. We know LSU was an early favorite for Dobson, but now is not in the final group. So not really a package deal. However, does it hurt if you're Carolina that you're getting them both on campus at the same time? Obviously not. Can you sell that a little bit? Hey, come, play with a guy you know pretty well. Play with a guy you're sharing a secondary with in high school. Yeah, that helps. I don't think that's going to be a deciding factor here. I felt like Davion was a little bit guarded in what he gave us in the interview. Didn't get a ton in terms of feeling like where he is headed from that. But I do know, at least coming into this weekend, man, there was a lot of LSU buzz here.
A lot of LSU buzz coming into the weekend. And Wes, I think, just full disclosure, is this the one that we have maybe the worst feel for coming out of the weekend? Maybe?
Worst feel for
worst fit. Yeah, I knew I was going to say that wrong. Like the most unclear, least clarity. Not worst feel in terms of, South Carolina isn't going to get them. They don't have a great chance. For me, it's just a little bit murky. Like I'm just not as sure on this one because I don't think coming into the weekend that South Carolina held the advantage, really. I think at times they have held the advantage in this recruitment. Davion Jones is a guy that earlier in his recruitment named South Carolina as a leader, right? Now, that doesn't matter. What matters is who's actually leading when he goes up there to pick a school or when he's doing a live stream to pick a school, or, of course, some may point out when he actually signs. Those are the things that actually matter. So the Gamecocks have been in this one a long time, but I don't think that they necessarily held the advantage going into the visit. So he's got, he's taken 5 official visits. He's basically got those 5 programs still in the mix. South Carolina is one of them. Like you said, he's got some carryover with Dobson with Auburn. LSU has had a lot of buzz for Davion Jones. I'm just not as sure on this one. And I thought his comments, after the visit, feedback we got, seems like things went pretty well. I think the question is, will it be enough for South Carolina to, be able to beat out LSU and those other programs? And note on the decision date for Jones, said he's going to decide on Sunday privately, kind of hammer out a decision and then reveal it on July 26th. So still a little bit of a ways to go here.
Yeah, like I said, he did not give us a ton in terms of where he is leaning. He did give us some very specific feedback on his decision plans. So private decision at first, and then we're going to wait July 26th. We'll all know where he is going. What goes into the process for him, development, how I feel about the place, playing time, the culture, the people, relationships. So we'll see which of those he finds, which school he finds those things at. He did mention development first. Not that I ever read too much into quotes about what you're deciding. That's never been a great indicator in recruiting, but I'm sure Torian Gray and those guys hammered home, much like they have with the other DB recruits, sort of what he has done with DBs in the past. And Chris, it was interesting to me too, where will South Carolina decide to play Davion Jones? And part of their messaging to him wasn't really like, sometimes it's more like, hey, we have a specific spot. This is how we see you. For him, it was more like, hey, we love your versatility. Like we really think you could help us at corner, you could help us at nickel, or you could help us at safety. And whichever one it has the biggest opportunity when you're in Columbia, if you choose the Gamecocks, is where you can play. And I do think that maybe caught his eye a little bit. This is a kid who has some physicality to him, just does a little bit of everything. We've got the film on right now on the video version. You're seeing him play some different spots. You're seeing him make plays on special teams, and just as a ball player, man, like Carolina has had success in its defensive backfield with guys that have just been labeled ball players. Your Kilgores, your Vicari Swains, your guys that do a little bit of everything in high school. That's been, Nicky Mawuri, obviously. That's been a good omen for guys to have success in this South Carolina defense with Torian Gray and Clayton White.
Yeah, Gamecocks think that this guy can play, any of those spots, safety, nickel, corner. He's got coverage ability, he plays with physicality. He can run. I think there was a game last year. Of course, he was still playing for West Charlotte at that time where, he took a kick to the house, as a kick returner. So, or no, it was an interception return for a touchdown, I think is what it was. So he, he has that big play type of ability. And, that's always an interesting question, Wes. I've almost, unless we specifically hear, I've almost tried to not do any sorting in my mind of where a DB may play for Torian Gray, because we'll see a kid be like, oh, that's got to be a safety. Nope, he's a corner, or that kid looks like a linebacker. No, he's a safety for Torian Gray and Clayton White. They really love the measurables with guys. And Davion is an interesting prospect because, he's not one of these 6'2", 6'3", really long guys that Torian Gray's recruited in the past. But he's also had success with guys like him as well. He might not fit we always talk about the Torian Gray mold. Like from a measurable standpoint, you may not see it, but this is a guy they prioritized for a really long time. So they really love that skill set. And as you said, that versatility. So, several days until he is supposed to sit down and hammer out that decision. And of course, even after he does, you still got a longer delay until he actually announces the decision. So I'm sure all these schools, including South Carolina, will continue to jockey behind the scenes to try to get the top position for Davion Jones.
Yeah, and like you said, man, I wish we could give people a little bit more, but we're not going to just make it up. That one is a little bit we'll see. We'll keep pushing, and obviously we'll have more on Gamecock Central if we get more on where he may be leaning. Like I said earlier, LSU was kind of considered to be a decent-sized favorite, at least entering the weekend for the Carolina OV. Chris, a guy that, frankly, probably has deserved a little bit more run on Gamecock Central that we've talked about this weekend, we have feedback from this weekend, would be MJ Evans, maybe an edge, maybe a defensive tackle for South Carolina. Certainly seemed to skew more towards the defensive tackle sort of things. They told him, hey, there may be some things you do out on the edge that you do at end, but for the most part, there's a long-standing relationship here with Travion Robertson. They see him as someone who can grow into that kind of true inside three technique, go up against guards and use his quickness to create issues, kind of like you've seen South Carolina do in the past with like a Tonka Hemingway, a TJ Sanders, guys like that. And that was one where Auburn, maybe some Florida coming into the weekend, had generated the buzz if you read online. But I know you talked to him, Chris. What's your vibe, if we're vibe casting here? What's your vibe on how that one went?
Yeah, Evans hit the radar pretty early for Carolina too. First visit was sophomore year going into junior year for the spring game. He camped last year, so he got to work with Travion Robertson and the defensive staff. He's been to Carolina now 5 or 6 times, according to him. And so, kind of, you're right, probably should have been on our part a little bit more conversation about Evans. And, maybe one of the reasons is they had to get to this visit because some others, namely Auburn, Florida, have been a little bit ahead. Was South Carolina able to make up enough ground? I do think they've got potentially some differentiators because, he does have that really great rapport with Travian Robertson. He spoke very highly of him this weekend. And also the positional differentiator. South Carolina and Robertson very much see him almost from the get-go as a 3-technique defensive tackle. He's listed his rival's profile. If you look at it right now, it says 235. He's more like 265 already. And so he's in the mold of one of those, he's probably not going to be a 310, 315-pound defensive tackle, but he could be 290 something with quickness and, kind of defensive end like pass rush skills on the interior. The other schools recruiting him think, maybe go play inside some, but he's more of a field edge type player for them. Evans, for his part, didn't really specify like I do want to play or don't want to play a certain position, but he did seem to think that long-term NFL prospects, 3-technique defensive tackle is his best pass. So will that help South Carolina when he's looking at long-term development? So this is another one that is kind of hard. Like, seems like South Carolina's firmly in there, but it's hard to tell what's actually going to happen. And it could happen quickly. He told us on yesterday, he may decide as early as this week if he can hammer out where he wants to go, if he's ready to make that decision.
Yeah, people have asked, of course, rightfully so, on our message board, which guys is South Carolina getting? Which guys do you feel best about? And frankly, Chris, there's a world where Carolina gets all 5, and there's a world where they miss on most of that group, I think. When you're talking about blue chip guys and you're talking about recruiting to the very end, it can go a number of ways, man. It just can. And frankly, I'll say it on both sides of it, I would not get too high if Carolina starts landing several of these guys. I would not get too low if they start missing on these guys, man, because it is still going to be, as we have said with some of these other misses, it is going to be keep recruiting, play the long game, and see if you can continue to get some interest from these guys as you go into the season if South Carolina has a good year. Like, you telling me Nate Carson is not going to pop up at a South Carolina game this year? Like, I would have a hard time believing Nate Carson doesn't come to Willie B to watch a game this year, regardless of if he's committed to South Carolina or elsewhere. So it's going to be the long game for Carolina regardless. So I would keep that in mind as these guys make their decisions. So, all right, we hit on all 5. Chris, let's go a little bit more big picture here because we'll make sure that we hit everybody, man. The other decisions that are coming up for South Carolina that we know of. So we hit those 5 guys, and then we have on let me make sure I have this right, June 25th, we have Kelvin Millington from North Oconee High School out of Georgia, who will be making his announcement. He took his South Carolina OV back a couple of weeks ago, Chris, and is someone we've kind of been tracking ever since. I believe the way we put it at the time was, hey, this is someone South Carolina can get if they decide to really push for him, and all indications are that they have been pushing for him. And so I think you have to feel actually pretty strongly, pretty good about Carolina's positioning there with Millington going into a June 25th, which would be Thursday, announcement.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier about Torian Gray and his type. I mean, Kelvin Millington's listed at 6'3", 180, and he looks a lot bigger than that even. This may be Torian Gray's, what do they say, white whale as far as trying to make the biggest possible corner that he can. And so, yeah, the indications after his OV to South Carolina earlier this summer where this is a guy, as you said, Wes, that South Carolina can absolutely get. So it looks like they've been pushing as of late. Very interesting prospect, obviously, because of that size. And I think this is one where you trust Torian Gray, right? Because he's taken guys that are big, that have traits out of high school that maybe they need some polish, but he's been able to take guys that have those traits and that size. Judge Collier is a great example, and maybe they don't have the biggest profile. Maybe they're not a top 100 player, and able to make them into really good players. Interesting, Wes, that Rivals, in terms of the industry rankings, is the highest by a good margin on Kelvin Millington. They have him number 297 overall and is a 4-star prospect, for what that's worth.
Yeah, for sure, man. I thought it was a little bit fascinating with Millington. We talked earlier about kind of the head-on nature of how they talked to Dobson about all the buzz about Beamer and, his future at South Carolina, all those different things. With Millington, my interview with him, they were very head-on about, and he was very – there was some wherewithal with him about, I'm not a 5-star rated recruit, but Torian Gray has taken 5-star guys and done well with them, or he's taken, quote, 3-star guys and done really well with them. And a big part of it was that very thing you just talked about, taking a similar skill-setted guy and then going and putting him in a position to succeed if he works for it at the next level. I will say this too, man. These ratings get a little bit skewed when the third ranking, so it's Rivals on 3, of course, is one ranking, 24/7, and then ESPN. When the ESPN ranking is not in there yet, it kind of makes the Rivals industry ranking a little bit funky. And so if you look at Rivals has him as a 4-star, like you said, number 38 corner in the country, and 24/7 has him as a high 3-star, number 40 corner in the country. So both of those rankings are fairly in line with hey, this guy has some upside to him. If you look at the Rivals industry ranking right now, 83rd corner in the country, heavily skewed because ESPN has not stuck a ranking on him yet, or Chris, it's not been entered into that system yet. So let me actually just see if I'm speaking out of turn. Yeah, no, pulled him up on ESPN right now. No ranking yet. So someone that just by the logistics of how all that works could move up in the overall rankings later on once ESPN actually gives him a rating. Hopefully, did that make sense? Hopefully that did.
It made sense. Yes.
Okay. Number 38 corner in the country again. Maybe a little bit of you look back this last cycle, Chris, there were a couple of corners, you look at Tristan Lewis, there were a couple of guys at DB that South Carolina kind of quietly got on the books, and then they steadily rose up in the rankings as the ranking process continued, and then had pretty good springs, you would say.
Yep.
So maybe a similar path here for our guy Millington.
Yeah, could be. I mean, Tristan Lewis, Garner Webb, and you talk to his high school coach, Chris Liner, head coach there, Bennett Greenwood as an assistant in past days, and he puts him in some company of some really good players in terms of raw ability and upside. And we saw Tristan walking around camp a bunch this summer, Wes, and he's huge. He's played high school quarterback. Again, he was one of these Torian Gray finds, DQ Smith, high school quarterback. I think we can make him into a safety, and he did. And he started a lot of games and played in a lot of games for South Carolina. So, yeah, this one's one that, over the past couple weeks, I think has gotten advanced in terms of South Carolina, where they are with Millington. Again, not one of these prospects that people are going to be talking about a ton if he commits, because he's not, that high 4-star top 100 type of guy, but someone that it looks like Gray has taken a liking to.
Yep, and Costy Barnes I would put kind of in that category. Some steady improvement in the rankings last year, going through a big senior year too. So, all right, guys, that'll do it for now. That'll do it for this episode of GC Live. Thank you for joining us, and come on over to GamecockCentral.com for complete coverage of South Carolina football and football recruiting, basketball recruiting, baseball recruiting, softball, women's basketball, all the above. Come join us. Right now, we still have a deal going that will get you your first 2 months on Gamecock Central for $1, continuing our combination subscription that gets you access to JC and those guys and the Big Spur and Gamecock Central. So, all right, guys, appreciate you joining us as always. He is Chris. I'm Wes, and we'll see you soon.